When you hear the name Dracula, you think of a cape, you think of a castle in the mist, of bats, of a fictional creature who drinks blood to survive. Hollywood has spent 100 years teaching you to fear a myth. But the truth is not about a monster who drinks blood. It is about a man who spilled it, oceans of it. Vlad III, the voivode of Wallachia, did not turn into a bat. He did not fear garlic or crosses. He was a creature of flesh and bone, a man of profound faith and terrifying intellect. To his people, he was a hero who stood against a tidal wave. To his enemies, he was Kazakli Bey, the Lord of the Stake. We often hear about his wars. We hear about the men he fought. But history has a habit of looking away from the darkest corners. Today, we are going to look where others look away. We are going to examine the fate of the most vulnerable captives in his war, the women. What Vlad Dracula did to the female captives of the Ottoman Empire was not just cruelty. It was a message written in human misery, designed to break the mind of the greatest superpower on earth. This is the story of how one man turned a forest into a graveyard, and why even the Sultan who conquered Constantinople covered his eyes in horror. To understand the monster, we must look at the boy. Cruelty is rarely born, it is made, and Vlad's cruelty was manufactured in the very heart of the empire he would later vow to destroy. As a child, Vlad was not raised in the warm embrace of a family. At age 11, his father gave him to the Ottoman Sultan as a hostage, a human collateral to ensure Wallachhia's loyalty. Imagine the psychological fracture. One day you're a prince in your father's court, the next you're a prisoner in a foreign land, surrounded by the people you were taught to hate. For 6 years, Vlad lived in the citadel of Egrigos. He was educated alongside the future Sultan, Mehmed II. But while he learned philosophy and science, he also learned something else. He watched. He watched the Ottomans' efficiency in war. He watched how they disciplined their own troops. He watched how they used terror as a tool of statecraft. The Ottomans were masters of psychological warfare. If a village rebelled, they didn't just defeat it, they made an example of it. Vlad absorbed this lesson like a sponge. He learned that in a world of giants, the small man cannot fight with honor. To survive against a wolf, you cannot be a sheep. You must become a rabid dog. You must be so terrifying, so unpredictable, that even the wolf hesitates to bite you. By the time he was released and returned to Wallachia to take his throne, the boy was gone. In his place was a man whose heart had turned to cold iron. He had no illusions about chivalry. He knew that to secure his crown, he would have to wade through a river of blood. When Vlad took the throne, he didn't find a kingdom, he found a mess. Wallachia was a buffer zone, crushed between the Catholic Kingdom of Hungary and the Islamic Ottoman Empire. It was a land of betrayal. The nobility, the boyars, were corrupt, switching sides whenever the wind changed. Crime was rampant. Poverty was absolute. Vlad's first move was internal. We all know the stories. He invited the corrupt nobles to a banquet. He fed them. He poured them wine. And then he led them to the courtyard. He didn't just remove them. He reset the social order. He forced their wives and daughters, women who had never worked a day in their lives, to build his fortress at Porniari. They carried bricks until their clothes fell off their bodies and their skin burst. This was the first sign. Vlad did not respect gender. He did not respect status. To him, you were either a tool for Wallachia, or you were an obstacle, and obstacles were to be removed. But his true target was always the South, the empire that stole his childhood. The Ottoman demands for tribute, gold, and young boys for the Janissary Corps became heavier every year. In 1459,
Vlad stopped paying. He didn't just stop writing checks, he nailed the turbans of the Ottoman envoys to their heads. It was a declaration of total war. He knew the Sultan would come. He knew the might of the East would descend on his tiny principality, and he knew that he could not win a fair fight. So, he prepared a theater of horror. In the winter of 1461, Vlad didn't wait to be attacked. He crossed the Danube. He invaded Ottoman territory. This was not a conquest for land. This was a raid of extermination. He moved from village to village, leaving nothing but smoke and silence behind him. His letters to the King of Hungary from this time are chilling. He lists his victims with the precision of an accountant. 23,884 Turks and Bulgarians, he wrote, not including those who were burned in their houses or whose heads were not presented to our officers. And here, in the freezing mud of the Danube banks, the fate of the women was sealed. In medieval warfare, women were usually taken as slaves. They were valuable. They could be ransomed, sold, or used for labor. But Vlad was not interested in economics. He was interested in psychological trauma. He gathered the captives, men, women, children. He didn't separate them. He wanted the Ottoman soldiers to see the family unit destroyed together. He began to perfect the method that gave him his name, the stake. We must be careful here. We must describe this without losing our humanity, but we must not look away. The stake was not a quick death. It was an engineering marvel of cruelty. A wooden pole, greased and rounded at the end, inserted into the body in a way that avoided vital organs. The victim was hoisted upright. Gravity did the rest. It was a slow descent. A person could survive for days. And Vlad didn't just do this to soldiers, he did it to the mothers. Why women? Why break the unspoken rules of warfare that usually spared the fairer sex from the worst of the battlefield executions? For Vlad, the female captive represented the heart of the Ottoman society. By destroying the women, he was sending a message to the Ottoman men. I am not just fighting your army, I am ending your future. I am destroying the very womb of your people. Reports from the time describe scenes that defy belief. In one instance, capturing a harem of a local pasha, he didn't sell them or take them for himself. He ordered them to be placed on the stakes in front of the city walls. He arranged them in patterns, geometric shapes of suffering. He created a forest of dying bodies. Imagine being an Ottoman scout riding ahead of the main army. You expect to find a battlefield. Instead, you find a silent village where the only movement comes from the wind blowing through the hair of the dead. You see women, their long dresses fluttering, suspended in the air. You see the brutality visited upon them, mothers with their infants sometimes pinned to their chest with the same piece of wood. This was a psychological nuclear bomb. It terrified the Ottomans. They were used to death, they were used to war, but they were not used to this. This was the work of a demon.
Spring 1462. Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of Constantinople, the man who brought down the Roman Empire, gathers an army. It is a leviathan, 60,000 to 100,000 men, cannons that can shatter city walls, the elite janissaries. They march north to crush the impudent gnat, Vlad Dracula. Mehmed expects a traditional war. He expects Vlad to hole up in a castle or meet him on a field. But Vlad is a ghost. The Ottoman army marches into Wallachia and finds nothing. The fields are burned, the wells are poisoned, the livestock is slaughtered. It is a wasteland. The Ottoman soldiers are hungry, they're thirsty, they're being picked off by arrows in the dark. And with every mile they march, the fear grows, because they have heard the rumors. They have heard what happened to the captives. And then they reach the outskirts of Targovishte. Vlad's capital. June 17, 1462. The sun is setting. The heat is oppressive. The Ottoman vanguard pushes through a dense forest, expecting to see the walls of the city. Instead, they enter a clearing, and the army stops. Historical sources, Greek, Ottoman, and Italian, all struggle to find words for what Mehmed saw. It became known as the Forest of the Impaled. It was a valley stretching for miles, and it was populated by 20,000 bodies. This was not a chaotic pile of corpses. It was organized. It was hierarchical. High-ranking Ottoman officers were on higher stakes, elevated above the rest, but surrounding them was a sea of civilians, and it is here that the fate of the women shocks the most. Eyewitnesses described entire families elevated on the wood. Women were placed alongside their husbands. The sheer scale of it meant that Vlad had spent weeks preparing this. This wasn't a sudden act of rage. It was an art installation of death. The wind carried the smell. The sound of carrion birds, crows, and vultures darkened the sky. The silence of 20,000 dead people is louder than any cannon. For the Ottoman soldiers, many of whom had wives and daughters back in Anatolia, seeing the female captives displayed this way broke their spirit. It violated the sanctity of the harem, the privacy of the home. It took the private sphere of the woman and exposed it to the most public, humiliating, and agonizing death possible. Sultan Mehmed II was not a soft man. He had walked through the blood of Constantinople. He had ordered the execution of brothers to secure his throne. He was a man of iron. But the chroniclers tell us that when he sat on his horse and looked out over the forest of the impaled, he physically recoiled. He covered his face. One chronicler records his words, "How can we despoil him of his lands, a man who is not afraid to do this, a man who can do such things to his own subjects and to ours? Such a man is worth more than a kingdom." It was a strange mix of horror and twisted admiration. Mehmed realized he was fighting a man who had no limits, a man who was willing to turn his own country into a graveyard just to prove a point. The Sultan, sickened by the stench and the sight of the rotting women and children, ordered his army to turn back. He retreated. Think about that. The greatest army in the world, defeated not by strategy, not by a superior force, but by a tableau of sheer horror. Vlad had won, but the cost was his soul. We must pause here to look at the individual stories. History often paints in broad strokes, but the tragedy is in the details. Legends surround Vlad's treatment of women in his own personal life, which reflect his treatment of captives.
There is the story of the merchant's wife. A foreign merchant visiting Târgoviște left a bag of gold in the town square, as Vlad had decreed that crime was effectively zero due to his brutal laws. When the merchant returned, the gold was there. But imagine the fear of the merchant's wife, knowing that if a single coin was missing, the punishment would not be a fine, it would be the stake. Then there is the darker legend of his mistress. It is said that a woman, trying to please the volatile prince, told him she was pregnant. Vlad, suspicious and cynical, had her examined by midwives. When they told him she was lying, he didn't just banish her, he cut her open. His justification? I wanted to see where the fruit of my loins was hiding. Whether this story is fact or folklore, it illustrates the atmosphere of his court. A woman's body was not her own. It was a vessel for truth or lies, and Vlad felt entitled to break that vessel to find what he wanted. And then, the wife. Legend says that as the Ottomans approached his castle at Poianari, Vlad's wife stood on the battlements. She looked at the dark forest below, then looked at the approaching Turkish army. She knew what happened to women captured by the Ottomans, slavery, the harem. But she also knew what her husband did to captives. She was trapped between two monsters. She reportedly said, "I would rather be food for the fish of the Argesh than a prisoner of the Turks," and she threw herself from the tower into the river below. Even the woman closest to him chose death over the reality of the world he and his enemies had created. Not everyone died on the stake. What happened to the women who were not killed but kept? They became laborers. Vlad believed that everyone must work for the state. There were no idle hands in Dracula's Wallachia. Women were conscripted to make uniforms, to repair walls, to bake bread for the army. They worked under the shadow of the stake. A mistake in weaving could mean death. A loaf of bread burnt could mean the loss of a hand. Fear was the air they breathed. For the Ottoman captives who were spared the stake, their fate was often to be marched back into the interior of Wallachia to work as serfs on the land of the boyars loyal to Vlad. They were stripped of their culture, their religion, and their freedom. They became ghosts in a foreign land, tilling the soil that was fertilized with the blood of their countrymen. After Sultan Mehmed II retreated in horror from the Forest of the Impaled, the war did not end. It only became more personal. The Sultan realized he could not defeat Vlad with brute force. Dracula was too wild, too unpredictable. So the Sultan used a different weapon, a weapon forged in the same childhood as Vlad himself. He sent Radu the Handsome, Vlad's own younger brother. Radu was everything Vlad was not. He had grown up at the Ottoman court, converted to Islam, was a favorite of the Sultan, and possessed the softness of silk where Vlad was hard as iron. The Sultan gave Radu an army and sent him into Wallachia with a simple message to the people: "I do not bring you stakes, I bring you peace." And here the fate of the women of Wallachia shifted again. Vlad was fighting a total war. He burned his own villages so the enemy would find nothing. Imagine the terror of a Wallachian mother. From the south come the Janissaries. From the north comes your own prince, willing to burn your house and poison your well just to deny them to the enemy. The women were caught between the hammer and the anvil.
Radu played on this fear. He promised protection to the wives and daughters of the boyars. He used women as a political lever. While Vlad was impaling captives, Radu was sending prisoners home. It was a psychological victory. Wallachia, tired of blood, began to defect to the handsome brother. By the autumn of 1462, Vlad was alone. His army had melted away. The nobles had betrayed him. He retreated to his mountain citadel, Poyanari Castle, the very castle that had been built on the blood and sweat of the boyars' wives years ago. It is a twist of fate. The walls raised by enslaved women now became the tyrant's last refuge. Legends say that the final tragedy of his personal life played out here. His wife, named Anastasia in some sources, Justina in others, was in the castle with him. She saw the fires of the Ottoman army in the Argesh valley below. She knew Radu was leading the Janissaries, but she also knew there would be no mercy. For Dracula's wife, capture by the Turks meant the harem. It meant becoming a trophy for soldiers who hated her husband more than anything on earth. Local legends state she said, "I would rather my body be eaten by the fish of the Argesh than become a toy of the Turks." And she threw herself from the tower into the abyss. The river in that spot is still called the Princess's River, Râul Doamnei. Even in his fall,